I'm Ted Thomas. Okay, we're recording. That's good. I'm Ted Thomas with the Arkansas Commission. I've been involved in the RTO level at OMS and RSC and MISO and SPP. I'm an NCEP board member and also on the Joint FERC Neighborhood Task Force on transmission planning, where mostly what I do is try to take the energy transition and manage the risks and rewards of that on behalf of Arkansas ratepayers. NCEP is an organization where all state electricity policymakers discuss industry-related topics. We're currently examining the transmission and distribution interface. Please join our listserv to hear about events, and we thank the DOE for its sponsorship. As you can see on the slide, we combine state environmental agencies, consumer advocates, legislators, energy offices, governors, energy advisors, and state utility commissions and discuss energy policy. Today, NCEP is facilitating the kickoff webinar about the DOE's Congressional and Intergovernmental Affairs program and its new Regional Specialties Initiative. NCEP encourages your participation in the regional listening sessions, where regional specialists are looking to hear from state policymakers and decision makers on priority. Registration is available by emailing, and you can see the dates and times for the regional listening sessions. To introduce our overall program, we have Deputy Assistant Director for Intergovernmental Affairs at the Department of Energy, Aimee Witteman. Do you prefer your title DAS, or you want me to say the whole thing every time? Deputy Assistant Secretary Whitman.
You can call me Aimee.
Has a background in advancing rural communities, working with the Midwest region on climate and energy, and most recently as Director of U.S. States Policy of Energy Innovation. Aimee will provide further introduction to her colleagues, but she has brought with her our Southwest Regional Specialist, Kristen Bato, our West Coast Regional Specialist, Rose Stevens-Booker, Appalachia Regional Specialist, Torend Collins, and Northeast Specialist, Spencer Thibodeau. If you do not hear your region called, there will be more regions added with more specialists assigned. Also today, DOE has brought in 2 representatives to help guide us toward the right point on these issues, and we will hear updates from them. First, we will hear from Carla Frisch, Director of DOE's Office of Policy, about topics related to the new legislation. Carla?
Hi, I'm so glad to be with you all today. As the chair said, I'm Carla Frisch with DOE's Office of Policy. I would like to share my screen here, if that's possible. Yes, looks like it is.
We're good.
Great. So can you see those slides? Great.
Yep.
Great. All right. So what we wanted to talk a little bit about today is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law signed by the president. No longer the Bipartisan Infrastructure Deal. It's now a law. And this law for the Department of Energy represents the single largest change to our agency since our founding in 1977. It moves over $60 billion through the department on working on what we like to call the solutions and the solutions agency. So we're looking at our ambitious and achievable climate goals to reduce emissions by half by 2030 and to get to net zero by 2050, to deploy clean electricity, to deploy clean transportation, and do that all while we are creating more job opportunities, particularly for jobs with family sustaining wages and the opportunity to join a union, and delivering to our energy justice communities around the United States. So there's lots more to come, but what we wanted to share with you today is a short overview of those energy investments. So the first of 4 categories. One is investing in American manufacturing and workers. So this entails building on the president's executive order from earlier in the year focused on energy supply chains and makes a direct investment in our manufacturing. And through DOE, there's $7 billion in the supply chain for batteries. So the production and also the recycling. So significant investments there in batteries. An additional $1.5 billion for clean hydrogen manufacturing and advanced recycling. And then there's a new $750 million grant program to support advanced energy technology manufacturing projects in coal communities and in other communities with certain characteristics. It also expands the authority of DOE's loan program office to help support all of this activity. And we want to do the manufacturing here, and we want to have more opportunities for American workers. So some of the things specifically in the bipartisan infrastructure law for workers are that it requires all construction workers, all workers on projects funded by the law to be paid prevailing wages. So making sure that they are getting the wages that are representative of their skills. It invests hundreds of millions in workforce development, largely through existing programs, and making sure people have the training that they need for these clean energy careers. And to track all of that progress, it establishes a multi-agency energy jobs council, looking at where are those energy jobs and where are they being created. So the second category is expanding access to energy efficiency and clean energy. So we particularly look at some households in the US spend more than 30% of their income on energy costs. So how can we help make sure that they're saving money, that their homes are warm during the winter? So one significant investment is a $3.5 billion in the Weatherization Assistance Program, which helps low-income households weatherize their homes and ultimately reduce those energy bills. There's a $500 million investment for cleaner schools for our children and our teachers, in parallel to, at the Department of Transportation, $5 billion investment in electric school buses, making sure that students are able to get to school in a way that is clean and doesn't affect the air quality that they're breathing. And then lastly, an additional $1 billion through the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program and the State Energy Program, which NARUC members and affiliates may be familiar with, those programs that have been around at DOE for a long time, and now again funding the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program, building on the Recovery Act, which was mentioned, of 2009. So all of that's really providing the opportunity to support the clean energy programs and projects in communities and cities and states and territories and tribes. The third area is delivering reliable, clean, and affordable power to more Americans. So we know, and all of you know, because you've been working hard on this, that climate change and weather events, extreme weather events, have made it clear that our existing energy infrastructure cannot endure without modernization and expansion. And this law makes a real down payment on that expansion and modernization. So on the electric grid and connections to it, it invests $11 billion in grants for states, tribes, and utilities to enhance the resilience of electric infrastructure, both against disruptive events like extreme weather and also its cybersecurity. It establishes a $2.5 billion transmission facilitation program for DOE and gives DOE some new authorities in trying to help get more transmission built across the country, and includes a significant investment in the Smart Grid Matching Grant Program. And then alongside building out our transmission and new generation, there's an investment in maintaining our existing clean generation fleet. So we've got that zero emissions generation. We want to make sure it's here to stay. So there's $6 billion for the Civilian Nuclear Credit Program. This would be administered by the Department of Energy to help existing nuclear plants, when it is safe, be able to stay open. And also there's a over $700 million investment in our existing hydropower facilities to help support their efficiency and continued operations. And last but not least, a very exciting new area for the Department of Energy is clean energy demonstrations. So demonstrations are a really important part of the research all the way to deployment process. So this is building the first of a kind, trying out a commercial scale technology to make sure it works and setting it up so the private sector can then take that and go ahead and deploy. So what the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law does is it invests $21.5 billion through an Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations. That includes $8 billion for clean hydrogen hubs across the country in different communities, more than $10 billion for carbon capture, direct air capture, and industrial emission reduction. A significant investment in advanced nuclear facilities, actually building them, they'll be generating electricity. And then $1 billion for demonstration projects in rural areas, and then $500 million for demonstration projects in economically hard-hit communities. So what this does is allows DOE to move into the large-scale demonstration activity and really set those up and get the technologies to a point where they're ready for industry to take them up. So that is the summary. That is a lot. There is a really exciting amount of activity in this bipartisan infrastructure law, which we're considering the down payment. And that is in parallel to the Build Back Better Act, which is still under discussion in Congress that passed out of the House. That includes many parallel and enhanced investments in these areas as well. But today we're talking about the bipartisan infrastructure law. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
We have one on the chat. Are you able to see the question in the chat, Carla? To sum it up in a sentence, what's DOE's plan as it begins rolling out this funding? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about later, but.
Yeah, it's a great question. And we are working on that actively right now. You can imagine all parts of DOE are actively involved in this. So in the law itself, for several programs, it sets out specific timelines. For example, something needs to be done in 120 days. And many of the investments are building on existing programs, which we're hoping to get up and running quite quickly. Some of them are completely new programs, which of course we have to design. We're working to do that as quickly as possible. And we want to make sure that, that we involve stakeholders as much as possible to the extent we can in setting up all of these opportunities.
And the regional meetings are a way to do that, and also to hear from folks what their priorities are in doing these or administering these funds. I see a few more questions here. Midwest, I'm sure there'll be that at the end of the day, every region will be represented. Then Betsy Kaufman, will funds be distributed in a series of RFPs? That's still a question of program design, correct?
That's right. We are hoping to use what we call an RFI, or request for information. So in many cases, to make sure that as many stakeholders as possible are giving us input. And actually, we just released an RFI on supply chain, which we can add to the chat, where folks can help inform us about what you think needs to happen to make sure that we do have a resilient and secure supply chain in the US to deploy clean energy technology.
Okay, thank you, Carla. Next, we will hear from Whitney Muse regarding, of course, what Carla discussed as the law has already passed. There's other proposals floating around on Capitol Hill. Whitney, please present.
Yeah, hi everyone. Happy to join today to talk about the transmission specific parts of the infrastructure bill. Also, it's great to be back at a NARUC NCEP event, as I used to work at NARUC in the International Programs Department a few years ago. And so specific to transmission, Carla mentioned the big transmission piece, the new transmission facilitation program that passed in the infrastructure bill. And for transmission specifically, there's kind of a pairing between what's in the infrastructure bill, but also what's likely to come and what we're hopeful to come in the Build Back Better reconciliation package that also includes billions for transmission lines, for grants to facilitate siting, as well as work related to interregional and offshore wind transmission planning, modeling, and analysis. And so in addition to the tax credits that are in the reconciliation bill. And so we look for the transmission pieces, we look for both of those to help really break the gridlock and some of the challenges that have been in getting transmission built more quickly. Carla mentioned that DOE is a solutions department, and a big priority for Secretary Granholm is deployment, and that includes deployment of new transmission lines and getting them all the way from being planned, being sited, permitted, constructed, to actually being operational and connecting some of the many renewable energy resources in the country to population and load centers that need them. And so in terms of the transmission related work in the bill, or rather in the bipartisan infrastructure law, Carla highlighted the pieces that are funding that's related to the grid. There are ones around the Smart Grid Matching Grant Program, as well as some of the grid resilience provisions, that some of that money could be used for grid infrastructure, but it's certainly broader than just transmission. The one true transmission piece in the bipartisan infrastructure law is that transmission facilitation program. And with it being a new program at DOE, we're still thinking through how to stand it up. And so I don't have as many details as I would like to be able to share with you now, but know that we're thinking through that and working through what effective program design could look like and how to use that $2.5 billion effectively, because we know for the cost of transmission, while it's a helpful new program to have, it's not enough certainly to meet the transmission needs that we have in the country. And so I see that there are questions coming in via the chat and the Q&A, and so I can turn it back to you, Chair Thomas, if you want to facilitate some of those.
Thank you. Are there questions for Whitney? I see.
There's a bunch for Carla. I can see, so for some of them, in terms of a question around Justice 40, and so the energy justice and the equity piece is quite important to the Biden administration and to the Department of Energy. And so we are looking and thinking through and working with the team that leads that under Shalonda Baker as to how we're going to implement that in the various provisions, also in line with what they require. Some have, call outs for, whether it's rural residents, whether it is specifically for state, local, tribal, and territorial provisions. And so we're certainly looking at everything with an equity focus. And I think there'll be more to come around that.
Thank you. Does anybody want to take the citing? I know the answer, but don't want to steal anybody's thunder. I think I know the answer. For corridors, for those corridors designated by the DOE, there is backup siting at FERC, but there's some process that has to go through before that happens, and that's in the bill that is already law. That is not in the other thing, so that has happened. Are you familiar
right? So
with that
that's
as well?
That's in the infrastructure, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and it provides some clarification for the national, I'm going to mess up the acronym, but the NITSI corridors, the National Interest Electricity Transmission Corridors, and where it streamlines the time that FERC is able to, if there's no actions by the states, that FERC is able to move forward. But we see this as not something that we would move with first at DOE, but something that, nor that FERC would, but that we see it as an opportunity to work with the states as we're talking through transmission siting. Again, for the transmission work in particular, we see the infrastructure bill law, as well as the reconciliation, the Build Back Better package as a team, as a pairing, because there are if citing is the metaphorical stick, then there's lots of carrots in the Build Back Better Act to help with planning, to work with the states on convening, and monies to help with the siting, to facilitate the siting of interstate transmission. We recognize that it's a challenging issue, and that we want to, as we're bringing the resources of the federal government, to bring all that we can to support the processes in the states to move that forward.
How does DOE coordinate with FERC in terms of the federal state task force on transmission planning? Are you familiar with that? Will DOE play a role with that?
Sure. And so the task force is between NARIC and FERC, as you all are both the regulatory agencies. DOE's role is certainly to support the process. And there's some support and technical assistance to ensure that there's sufficient resources from the state regulators and NARIC to I think provide the time and the resources to convene with FERC, but DOE does not have a role in that process. We certainly at DOE talk to NARIC, we talk to state regulators, we talk to FERC, and certainly are supportive of both what will come out of the FERC-NARIC task force, but also FERC's broader docket on transmission, interregional transmission planning and cost allocation and generator queue issues, some of which are likely to be discussed in upcoming task force discussions as well.
Thank you. Cost allocation, always a sticky topic. We have a question on that.
We do, and I would like to punt that one to the FERC-NARIC task force to take that on before DOE does. We've got lots of work to do with the Office of Electricity, but I think that will more likely come up in the proposed rulemaking that FERC is undergoing. NARIC, as well as DOE and many other organizations, filed comments for the ANOPR in October. Reply comments are due tomorrow around the cost allocation topic, and I think we'll see more in the new year around FERC moving forward with next steps on their proposed rulemaking. But I think that's where, from the federal side, that there'll be more on cost allocation and not from DOE.
Okay, and of course, when you reduce the cost of a transmission project, you greatly simplify cost allocation questions just by reducing the total cost. Next, we will hear from Deputy Assistant Secretary Witteman with regard to their regional outreach.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think, Carrie, do you mind pulling up the slide with the slide I sent you with the map, just so folks can visualize the regions of the country? But I'll get started while she's pulling that up. It's great to be with all of you. Thank you. As Chair Thomas said, my name is Aimee Witteman. I serve as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Intergovernmental Affairs, and was very pleased and grateful to be joined by my colleagues, Carla Frisch and Whitney Muse, who have a lot of deep policy expertise. And me and my team are more the external stakeholder relationship managers. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our role at DOE, which is new. And before I do that, I just want to acknowledge at a high level that what we're sharing with you today is necessarily very high level, and the components of the bipartisan infrastructure law that DOE will be managing. I did put in the chat box a link to the fact sheet that we released when the bill was signed into law, which basically goes over the information that Carla and Whitney shared. As Carla mentioned, we are deeply in conversation across the department right now on what implementation is going to look like. And as we have more information about all of this, of course, we'll be sharing it with you. You are critical partners in making this happen. In many cases, the funding is going to go through states and community entities. So we're all part of ensuring that the President's Build Back Better vision and agenda lives up to their promise, and that ultimately people experience improvements in their lives across the country. So appreciate your patience. We just wanted to be sure that we had a touch point with you now, and we'll have, as Chair Thomas said at the very beginning, listening sessions that we're going to do, thankfully organized by NARUC and NASIO and U.S. Climate Alliance in different parts of the country, so we can hear from you all in your roles. What questions do you have? What concerns do you have? What opportunities do you see in your regions? So those will be forthcoming over the next couple of weeks. But so our role in the Intergovernmental and External Affairs team and with our regional specialists is really to be this conduit between the department and state energy offices, governor's offices, mayor's offices, tribes, commissions, to be a point of contact for you all. Many of you have points of contact within the department, and you will continue to have those relationships. This is an additional layer of capacity that the department is bringing to be in deep partnership with all of you, recognizing that in order for this to be successful, we need to be working, we need to be hearing from you, we need to be taking what you're seeing and doing in as we're implementing program and improving in a continuous way. And so I'm going to invite the specialists on this call to put their contact information in the chat box, but we have, these are the regions, and there's no particular formula to how we've cut the regions. We're sort of looking for sort of similarities, you know, with landscape economies. There's some RTO, but not entirely, as you can see. But Spencer Thibodeau is our specialist for the Northeast. He's a Mainer coming from the City Council in Portland, Maine. He's tackling the Northeast. Torend Collins is covering Appalachia, and their faces are sort of covering the states, but Appalachia for us includes Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Christian Bato is our specialist for the Southwest, and Rose Steffens-Booker, our specialist for the West. We have additional specialists that will be joining us over the next couple of months, and an invitation to you. You may have heard this if you joined us for a stakeholder call that we did with our chief of staff a couple weeks ago, but in order to deliver on this enormous opportunity, the department is going to be adding about 1,000 new employees over the coming months, including a couple more specialists. So if you have folks that you think would be dynamic leaders in this arena, please have them contact us, send in their resumes, because we will be we'll be building up both the specialists, but across all the programs at the department to deliver on the bipartisan infrastructure law. The specialist role and this like relationship building really stems from a commitment that the secretary and the president had made to place-based approaches. And when we say place-based approaches, we mean engaging community members and stakeholders as active participants in program development and implementation, and taking a systems approach. We have other people in addition to our team. Carla's adding to the policy team. We have additional people within the department who are working externally. Karen Skelton, some of you may have working with the private sector. Kate Gordon is our senior advisor to the secretary, who's really leading on the interagency working group for coal and both coal and power plant community transition. And then Shalonda Baker's name came up. She's the Deputy Director for Energy Justice and the Secretary's Advisor on Equity at the department. A few of you put questions in the chat box who I know are very keenly interested in the new law and the J40 initiative. And just confirming again that Shalonda and her team are working to analyze the new bipartisan infrastructure law to understand key equity milestones and deliverables, and they're helping guide program offices at the department on how to implement this law from an equity and justice perspective, and to ensure that we're meeting the goals of the J40 initiative, which requires 40% of overall benefits of federal investments, including investments in clean energy and energy efficiency, flow to disadvantaged communities. So we're taking a whole of government approach. We're really taking a systems approach to this work. There's changes going on structurally within the department, but we want to be sure that you have contact information for this team. And again, they can help as you have questions and we're pivoting towards implementation, can help. If you don't have an existing relationship at the department, they can help find the right person to answer your question. Obviously, there's additional huge priorities in the Build Back Better Act, which the House has passed and the Senate is taking up and considering. And so there's a lot of, there's a lot of change going on and there's still yet to come. So we're just looking forward to being in touch with you. And again, as the chair stated at the beginning, and again, grateful to the association for helping to conduct these listening sessions, which will be a chance for us to really get a better understanding of what you're seeing in your state and community and where Department of Energy Resources can help advance your goals in your part of the country. So that's just a little overview of who we are. You've got contact information. Again, we've got new specialists joining us in the next couple of months, but we're really looking forward to doing these regional listening sessions before the end of the year with you all. And I can say, I think there was a question about the Midwest. We do have a Midwest specialist coming, but in the meantime, you can feel free, and I'll put my contact information in there, to be in touch with me, and I'm happy to connect with states in that region, which is my former neck of the woods. And then when we have our new specialists join, put them in contact with all of you. Thanks.
Thank you, Amy. Are there questions? I know there's a lot of program-specific questions. These programs are under development. Some don't exist. So use these regional meetings to say what you think they should be, and you have contacts for, your point of interface with the agency. Get to know those folks and be thinking about what you suggest should be done as these programs are designed by the folks at DOE. Are there questions?
I wonder, it says reiterate the process for participating in the regional listening sessions. I think there was an email that was shared at the top to register for those, and perhaps the NARUC and CEP staff can put that in the chat function, or we can follow up afterwards with that.
That is correct.
There we go.
Those are your dates for the regions that are assigned, with more to be added as it states on the slide. And Carrie Worthington also, email her if you have any questions in terms of the logistics. Let me make sure I'm not missing questions. I was supposed to tell you how, but everybody knows how. Obviously, to answer questions or ask questions.
And Maryland is, there's a question in there on Maryland, and it's not part of the Northeast, it's part of the Mid-Atlantic region, for which we don't have a specialist yet, but we'll be adding those, and to ensure that we're not missing an opportunity to get your feedback. And if a specialist isn't going to be coming for another month or so, we'll set those up as a listening session, and we'll have other DOE staff join those, for not leaving any states out.
A question regarding the loan program office. How will these new stuff interact with the existing loan program office? Anybody have thoughts on that?
So part of what the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law does is actually expand our loan programs office. For example, it's worked in the past on light duty vehicles, but now it can also work on medium and heavy duty vehicles. So for the new programs, those, some of the authorities sit within the loan programs office, and for anything that has a loan program like design, then they're being coordinated across several programs in DOE. And that's the case for many parts of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, is there's different parts of DOE working together. I saw a question earlier about the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations. That's actually, the clean energy demonstrations cover several technology areas. So those offices will be working together, and the law creates an actual new office that'll be the hub for that coordination. So internally, we have quite a bit of cross-pollination and collaboration underway.
Thank you. Other questions? And I'm not sure if this is a question or a comment. The District of Columbia, are they assigned to a particular region?
But yeah,
Are
I
they in
just
the
typed it
Mid-Atlantic?
in. Yeah, those will be in the Mid-Atlantic. Yep.
Okay. And the DC Public Service Commissioner is our new FERC commissioner that was confirmed, 2 weeks ago? So Willie Phillips, congratulations to new Commissioner Phillips from DC. Other questions? Here is a question. Will there be funding directly available to state commissions to increase workforce or planning with regard to transmission planning?
So for planning, for transmission planning, the big pots of money for that are actually in the Build Back Better bill that's in the Senate right now. And so there is, I believe it's $100 million for planning in what left the House for interregional and offshore wind transmission planning that would certainly, go to the states and to the regions to help with the transmission planning. For what's in the bipartisan infrastructure law, there are certainly technical assistance and things related to supporting the deployment of the various provisions that are grid related, but the specific call out for transmission planning and getting deep in the weeds with the ISOs and RTOs and leveraging the analysis of the national labs and other stakeholders is the money are in the Build Back Better package that we hope passes the Senate soon.
Thank you, Whitney. Other questions? Closing thoughts from our panelists? Carla, Whitney, Aimee? Want to sum it up?
Sure. Great to connect with all of you.
Go ahead.
Just
Go
great
ahead,
to
Whitney.
connect with all of you all. And then, on the electricity pieces, we're looking forward in transmission, looking forward to working with the states and keeping an open dialogue. You have the contact information for many of us on the call, and we're always looking to work with the states, but I'll turn it over to Aimee for final words.
Yeah, well, I'll invite
have
Carla and, oh yeah, go ahead.
We do have a couple of questions that we can go on and hit, and then we'll tee that up. What's the fastest way to find out where the Office of Equity has completed equity review for infrastructure funds?
Yeah, so I mean, I think by way of kind of closing thoughts on my end around this is that we actually are meeting tomorrow on creating a portal or email address, a way for you to sign up to be able to get information across the department as these decisions are being made, including the Office of Equity's review of the infrastructure fund. So I would say stay tuned. And if you would like to be added to a list for ongoing information as these updates are coming out, to let me know, because we're building out a contact management system way of being in touch with you all as those updates come out. So I would say stay tuned, and if you'd like to sign up, if you're not already signed up, to please email me at the address that I put in the chat box.
And I'll just
add turn it to Carla.
Thank you. As you can tell, we are really excited about this. This is a really significant investment in clean energy across the U.S. And I will say, for those that were around, I know NARUC was very active in the ARA process, and we made a lot of good progress at that time. And what's different about this bipartisan infrastructure law is this is a sustained investment over 5 to 10 years. So we are working as quickly as possible to get these new programs up and running and to move funds through existing programs that have been expanded. But the idea here is to build the infrastructure that we need to catalyze that clean energy transformation, build that domestic manufacturing, create those jobs, and really invest in energy justice and equity. So for all of that, we are going to continue to reach out to you all and are going to rely a lot on your input. So very much appreciate the opportunity to be on with you today.
A lot of new stuff going on, new funding, new programs to establish. And if you want to have input on that, this is how you do it. Get to know these regional folks and participate in the process on these dates and follow along if you're in the other regions. With That, I guess I'll pass it back to Carrie.
Thank you for joining. We're going to